We're live with the decision point. This is Anand. The decision point improvised.
Improvised
Improvised
indeed.
decision point today for the people.
They asked for it, so we'll deliver. And we get to talk about the most fun thing today. Instead of being nice like we normally are and, telling you about people that we like and things that we like and players that we like, front offices that we like, today we're going to tell you what everybody did wrong.
That's right. We are the least favorite drafts, the teams that squandered draft capital, that gave up too much to move up. Oftentimes, that's one of the cardinal sins, and one of the easiest ways to get on the losers list, our draft losers list, is to trade way too much to move up, not enough. Right, trading too much to not get enough back. So the overspenders, right? That's an easy way to get on this list. Or if you had previously overspent, if you had previously made bad decisions to bring in people that aren't even playing anymore, oftentimes, or didn't actually win the starting job, and you paid maybe multiple first rounders. Now you're paying the price for that. You don't have these picks. Like, oh, you just are criticizing Team X because they don't have enough picks, right? They of course they didn't have a great draft. They only had 5 or 6 picks. It's like, oh, why do they only have 5 picks? Why was that? Where was their first rounder? Where was their second rounder? Who did they? Oh, because they traded for Trey Lance. Oh, because they traded for a running back. Oh, yeah, that's why. Yeah, that's why. So that's why. So today on the decision point, we are going to be talking about the teams that failed on draft day. I am broadcasting from Corfu, Greece. I did not know if this was going to be possible. I brought my recording equipment. I brought my microphone, as you can see. I've yet to stream. I couldn't do the Sonic Truth, where there was a whole event. Couldn't do that. Cody did a great job filling in for me with the Sonic Truth. But there is no vacation for the Podfather, right? There's no vacation. I knew that we had to do a show. You and I had to do a show. We promised the people that we didn't get to the big losers from the draft, so we're going to do a special second show, and here we are.
Here we are. And I mean, there are a lot of teams that made a lot of questionable decisions, both long before we got to Kansas City that had impacts on our time in KC, but also, teams that traded up way too much on draft day or traded back and didn't get enough, which isn't worse by any means, but you obviously didn't maximize what you had in terms of value. So we'll get into all that. But man,
yeah,
some
so
of these are tough.
let's just list the team. This might be a short show. I might have a dinner to go to.
Plus, we don't like focusing on losers, right?
We've got at least 10 teams I want to talk about. So give me a team, just not a team that totally face planted, but a team that you thought had an underwhelming draft.
I think there's something to be said for Buffalo's draft, right? And it's sometimes teams get lost in this whole, oh, we're good, right? We don't have to keep acing the draft. We can now draft for positional need, or we can draft because we think player X will turn into this. And look, fantasy wise, Dalton Kincaid is a fun pick, right? Like it's what are you doing here? What was the purpose of this? Right? Like I understand.
It's a luxury pick. It was a luxury pick in the first round. This is what these teams do. This was James Cook last year was a luxury pick.
Yeah,
right. They traded for Nyheim Hines, then used Nyheim Hines in that role.
Yeah,
right. You don't need James Cook. What are you doing?
And the thing is, the idea that Dalton Kincaid will be used as a wide receiver too, then why did you blow all this draft capital on Gabe Davis and then bring in Khalil Shakir? And then you like over and over and over again, they've tried to solve this wide receiver 2 problem by not getting a wide receiver.
Draft a wide receiver, Anand.
Exactly.
If you have a wide receiver problem, then draft a wide receiver. I hear this time and time and time again. And we keep hearing from these teams that they're going to use these move tight ends as wide receivers, right? Like,
and then what happens?
It doesn't work out. Even the best of the best sort of receiving tight end prospect we've ever seen, Kyle Pitts, has been underutilized, though he has been splitting out wide more than almost any other tight end. playing that X receiver position. They really didn't have an X receiver in, the previous year. And then they got Drake London last year, but they're still playing a lot of Kyle Pitts in the slot, still playing a lot of Kyle Pitts out wide and some Drake London in the slot, which I think is a cool and effective configuration. But they don't do it enough. They can't do it enough. And Kyle Pitts did not produce. He, in fantasy football, he certainly underperformed his ADP. And I have drafted some Dalton Kincaid in tight end premium leagues and in leagues where we start 2 tight ends.
Yeah.
And I've gotten the bare minimum of Kincaid. I think I have a couple Kincaids. I have a lot more of a couple other tight ends we'll talk about in a little bit, because I want some exposure to Kincaid. I am interested in seeing how a player that was a super producer and also is supposed to be a great athlete, but we don't know he's a great athlete, right?
Yeah.
So he's supposed to be a great athlete. So here's the thing. Why are you drafting Kincaid when a guy that was even more productive, was an even more premium prospect, was the clear number 1 tight end in this class throughout the process until the final hour? Then in the final hour, it's like, well, these guys are both 245, 250 pounds. They're receivers first, blockers second. But, Kincaid is what's in the box. We now know that Michael Mayer is not the best athlete, right? Below average agility score, below average burst score. And that's what chased a bunch of teams off of him in the late first round, like the Cowboys. And that's why he fell to the second round. But Kincaid, he's the unknown. We don't know how fast he is exactly. We don't know how explosive he is. We can let our imagination run wild. I mean, the scouts have told us that he's a super athlete. Just watch the tape. So we'll go with that guy. We'll go with the guy in the box, the guy with all the unknowns. I just think it's egregious that you would draft a player at the tight end position, which is not typically a first-round quality position. Okay, so if you're thinking about all the types of positions you want to draft in the first round, left tackle, edge rusher, things we talk about on the show every episode, right?
Yep.
Never is tight end a key building block piece that you need to get in the first round. That's not, right? You want to get your tight end in round 2 or 3. I would probably target the 3rd round if I'm sourcing a tight end from the draft. First round, that ain't it, right? That's typically not the best use of capital. So you're starting off poorly, right? You're starting off picking the wrong position. Now it's a player that didn't test. So it's just purely, his athleticism profile is purely speculative at this point, and it's not a typical first round position. And now it comes out that no, we view him as a tweener, which is another death sentence.
Yeah, that's never.
And we're gonna play him out of position. We're not gonna play him at his drafted position. We're going to play him more at receiver because we had this receiver problem, and then we didn't like the receivers that were available to us because they were a big 3, or we thought they were a big 3. A lot of NFL teams included Quentin Johnson in that, so they had Quentin Johnston as part of a big 4. The big 4 were gone. Oh, just trade down. Just trade down. You don't like the receivers available there, and that's your biggest need? Trade down.
The other part of this, too, that drives me up the wall is we've seen true number 1 receivers come in the teams. Justin Jefferson was drafted at 22. We couldn't believe that he fell that far, right? Now, we talk all the time about how Rager was taken before him, but Philly drafted a receiver. If your goal was to get the best playmaker available, what you should have done is, as soon as Jackson Smith and Jigba fell below 17, if you're going to move up for somebody, if you're going to bet on a profile, if you're going to say, we're going to go get someone that is dynamic and game-changing to put next to Stephon Diggs, it's not a tight end that didn't test. And I like Dalton Kincaid a lot. I liked him when he was at Utah. I like him as a prospect. At the bottom of the first round, you are gambling huge that he is not only what you think he is, but that he is far beyond what you've seen on the field, right? That's a crazy pick there for me.
It's just very speculative.
I wouldn't have done it.
The first round's not the place to be speculative.
No.
Period. Without exception. You don't speculate on players in the first round. If you are going to go tight end and you want a receiving tight end in the first round, if you're going to use that kind of valuable capital, you better use it on Michael Mayer.
Yeah.
You better use it on a player that we know to be a truly special, prolific, a prodigy tight end, right? A guy that was putting up 500 yards with a 70% catch rate as a freshman.
With bad
that was an
quarterback
utterly
play, by the way.
dominant number one receiver on his team in Notre Dame last year. We blew away the other receiver. I mean, it wasn't even close. You look at what Mayer put up in terms of yardage, receiving yardage on a low volume offense, right? An anemic
with bad
offense.
quarterback play, might I add.
Right. That's why we have a dominator rating.
Yeah.
Right. 35% dominator rating for Michael Mayer is silly, because here's the thing, that on player profile, you'll notice that that's only 95th percentile on player profiler, right? Only 95th percentile. But I say that because all the other tight ends that have higher dominator ratings did it at like Stetson, right? They did it at small schools, Division II schools, Division III schools, where they were just going up against opposing linebackers and safeties that couldn't even come close to matching up to them in their size and speed. And it wasn't until the NFL they even had any peers in terms of size and speed. So, of course, they're going to dominate at lower levels of competition with that size speed profile. That's why those are typically the top, 15 to 20 tight end dominator ratings. You're going to see mostly small schools with those profiles. And then there's Michael Mayer.
Yeah. And look, say what you want about Utah. Utah's quarterback this year was significantly better than Tyler Buckner was for Notre Dame this past year. So, I mean, yeah, like there's just a whole host of reasons why this Kincaid pick is strange. But
yeah, it was a bad position.
It's odd.
It was a bad position to select. Okay.
Yeah.
And if you do select that position, it was the wrong player.
Yep.
The bottom line is they should have been picking there anyway. They should have been trading up to get Jackson Smith and Jigba, or down and banking picks in the future.
Yeah.
It was the absolute worst move to stay there and get Kincaid.
Yeah, I don't understand that whatsoever. And the rest of their draft is fine. We like Osiris Torrance.
Osiris Torrance saved their draft.
I agree.
Had they not just picked like a gift, right? If they hadn't been gifted Osiris Torrance in the second round,
gift. Yeah,
then it would have been like a bottom 5 draft.
Yeah. And this is not an example of completely blowing the draft entirely, but it does show you just how different your draft can look. Let's say, they had given up one of their later picks and moved up, or, given up something next year to go and get a Jackson Smith and Jigba, or traded out of there and still ended up with a tight end and Michael Mayer. How different does this draft look, right? So it's not abject disaster, push the red button, this is the worst draft we've ever seen. It's just, this is how quickly one really bad value first round selection can change the opinion of what your draft is or could have been.
Yeah, they squandered it. Just to put Michael Mayer's 2022 season in context, okay? He had 809 yards, right, on a team that did not even throw for 3,000 yards. Okay, so this team threw for around 2,700 yards, Notre Dame. So like I said, it was Drew Pine-led offense, okay? No good. The second receiver, the second most productive receiver, he played 13 games, okay? 30 catches, 340 yards, and 1 touchdown. That was Lorenzo Styles. And then we also had Jaden Thomas, who played 13 games, 25 catches, a few more yards, 361 yards. Okay, so those players combined couldn't even half Michael Mayer's production. It's amazing. It's amazing.
Lorenzo's
combined, they have his yardage, but he more than doubled their touchdowns.
And if you want to know how
Mayer
much
had
he was
9 touchdowns. right? The
Matt,
highest touchdown total by any other receiver on Notre Dame last year was 3. So if you
Matt,
needed a tight end, you know that what you're getting with Michael Mayer. You're getting a Zach
and
Ertz level producer at tight end,
and
which
he
is
was
what you want.
productive.
That's why I've drafted more Mayer in rookie drafts, because I mean, a lot of these rookie drafts where it's tight end premium or we start 2 tight ends, and at the middle or end of the second round, I keep getting Mayer. Laporta keeps going in front of him. In 2 tight end leagues, Will Levis is gone. I'm seeing Jaden Reed. I'm seeing a lot of course, Marvin Mims. I mean, I would at least like the choice, right?
Right.
Do I go Marvin Mims or to go Michael Mayer? I haven't had that choice of seeing Mingo go before him. And I'm in a high stakes league with Theo. We'll talk about it on the Sonic Truth podcast, where I'm like, okay, so let me get this straight. Where are tight ends that are typically move tight ends? Where are they going in fantasy? Right? Where's Greg Dulcich going? Like these types of, and they're going before him. I'm like, okay, Michael Mayer's floor is Zach Ertz.
He was their passing offense, Matt. Lorenzo Styles, the guy that you named as their number 2 wide receiver last year, transferred to Ohio State to play DB. He doesn't even play the position in college anymore.
Yeah,
That's what you're talking.
I'm pulling up the draft right now.
He was their whole offense last year. Like
he was their whole offense, right?
And anytime you have a program like Notre Dame, right, that comes out of the gate slow as they did last year, and then rattles off 9 wins against Notre Dame's schedule, which everybody likes to talk about how weak Notre Dame's schedule is. It's the biggest lie told in America, because you see that they play Army and Navy. They don't play FCS Southwest in Towson in week 13, right? Every team on that schedule is legitimate. They play mostly an ACC schedule, but they have USC, they have Michigan, they have Clemson on their schedule. These are not nobodies that Michael Mayer was their whole offense against. And if you're going to bet on a production profile, right? Sure, may not be the best athlete. He was better than Clemson's athletes. He's better than USC's athletes.
That's
better than Michigan's athletes.
Yeah, he's just really good at football.
Yeah,
right? That's Zach Ertz. So correction. Zach Ertz is not his floor. His floor is Pat Freiermuth. Yeah, I think we'd all agree. At worst, he's going to be Pat Freiermuth, right?
Yeah.
Well, in this draft, in this startup draft that I'm in with Theo, it's a high stakes. I'm in there with Scott Barrett, who also picked 3 tight ends. I'm about to pick my 3rd tight end because it's tight end super premium. Pat Freiermuth went 2 rounds before Michael Mayer.
Whoa.
There's something that happened when Dalton Kincaid got drafted before Mayer. Suddenly, everyone started questioning Mayer, like, oh, maybe he's not the golden boy tight end.
I mean, it happens.
It's just weird. It's weird how fickle sports fans and fantasy gamers are when it's like, can we just take a step back, maybe in a time machine to a month ago?
Yeah. It's
right?
like,
what are we doing?
Do you remember when the 2020 and 2021 drafts, when Burrow, Jefferson, and Jamar Chase came out, there were people that were so bored of the fact that they were all great and on the field at the same time. And they were like, well, what if Chase and Jefferson inflated Burrow? What if having Burrow inflated Chase and Jefferson? Of course, them all being in the same offense together helped them all. But how bad are your eyes? What are you watching? Because if you watched Michael Mayer,
it got to the point where we were 1 pick away. We were literally 1 pick away from teams overthinking it so much that Jalen Waddle goes before Jamar Chase, and Atlanta did overthink it to an extent where they actually drafted a tight end ahead of Jamar Chase.
Right? I understand how good Kyle Pitts is as a tight end. Tight ends just aren't valuable relative to number 1 wide receivers unless you're Kansas City and you have Pat. That's an exception. Not
they got bored of the excellence, and at the last minute, Buffalo decided, no, we're not going to take the sure thing, even though this is a very valuable draft pick we're about to execute. We're about to push the button on something that is incredibly valuable. We need to be highly risk averse with this pick. We're not going to take what's in front of us. We're going to go what's in the box. Johnny will take what's in the box. And more often than not, what's in the box is not as good as the real thing that you were staring at the whole time.
Yeah.
And then you decided to take your eye off it at the last second. Fantasy gamers do it. I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. NFL teams are guilty of it. In this particular case, Buffalo was guilty of it. Give us another team that you thought face planted on draft day.
I think the obvious one is the Niners. I mean, I don't know. I don't know how much more.
that wasn't, but I disagree with that because it wasn't a draft day face plant necessarily. It was a culmination of bad trade ups that led them to a place where they had no capital. And then the capital they decided to use was put to use on kicker.
Yeah. This is when we talk about hit the red button. Again, if your roster is as built out as an Eagles or as a Niners roster is, you can get away with some stuff. And we talked about drafting Jalen Carter and drafting Nolan Smith last time when we talked about the Eagles. This is how you go from there to in a precarious spot rather quickly. If you keep drafting kickers in the third round and giving away round and 1-2 capital for a quarterback that has played 4 games for you and a running back that is basically a 2-3 year rental. And that's not to say that Christian McCaffrey isn't great. He is. Of course he is. But again, now you're talking about round 1, 2, 3 draft capital for a quarterback that doesn't play for you ever. He's either hurt or you don't play him. A running back that you've gotten on his second contract, and now a kicker. This is like, if the Niners roster wasn't already so good, this would be a panic button moment. But because they're so good, they're arrogant enough to think that they can get away with drafting a kicker in the third round. And the thing is, nobody has ever drafted a kicker this high and been happy about it. Janikowski was a first-round pick and was incredible forever, and I still think the Raiders would tell you that was a bad decision.
Yeah, that was the Kyle Pitts of kickers.
Yeah,
right. It's like, yes, this is a phenomenal talent at this particular position. You just don't draft that particular position that high ever.
Yeah, it's the classic wait till the end of day 3. If you want to get in front of somebody, draft them in round 6 instead of round 7. Because I promise you, right? It's the revisionist history that teams will tell themselves all the time. The Niners are telling themselves one of 2 things right now. It's either, oh, someone else would have taken him. No, they wouldn't have. Or it's, oh, well, kicking was a problem for us last year, and we're that close to a championship.
You want to roll out a rookie kicker on a championship run? I don't care how good Jake Moody is ultimately going to be. It's going to take him a couple years to get fully comfortable in the NFL. He's not going to be his best self for at least a few years.
Yeah,
and look at some of these other picks. They're taking a safety, a box safety that runs a 4.65 on day 2, right? Jair Brown, I understand.
Like him a lot as a player.
For some systems, tough, thumper, great instincts, understandable. Like he's a piece you add in day 3, not day 2. But I understand the pick, right? It was a value pick at the time. It's just not a difference maker on defense. And you keep looking through this. I mean, another third round pick that they squandered was a backup tight end, Cameron Latu. Okay. I love the process of the Darrell Luter Jr. pick because it was South Alabama cornerback, right? And D Winters, that's the D Winters. That's where you go inside linebacker. So I agree with the process of going D Winters. That was great value in the 6th round on an inside backer. And then the small school corner in Darrell Luter. I like those picks. The rest of these picks, Robert Beal Jr., defensive end from Georgia in the 5th round. He's going nowhere. Braden Willis, nothing, right? Ronnie Bell can't play. So it was also just they minimized upside with only a handful of quality picks in the later rounds. And the quality picks that they had, okay, safety, inside backer, really just Darrell Luter is the only player that we could project to make an impact at value either in the passing game or defending the pass. That's pathetic.
It's tough because you watch two rosters that we think are pretty similar in terms of talent in San Francisco and Philly, and you watch them do the exact opposite. Howie is so ready to acknowledge that he's blown something, move off of a guy too soon, trade for something that he doesn't draft well. Meanwhile, the Niners are, Matt, who's their quarterback? They have three of them, right? Like, and you're surrounding this guy with all kinds of talent, but the problem is everyone that's around him right now is going to get too expensive because you can't pay an Ayuk, a Kittle, and a Debo all at the same time, while paying McCaffrey and potentially paying a quarterback, while making Trent Williams the highest paid left tackle in the game. Then what are you going to do on your defense, right? That's why drafting, even when you're at this stage, is so important, because you're going to lose important pieces that you can't afford to pay. And if you don't have someone to backfill that role, you get to where the Rams are really, really quickly.
Yeah, they have no depth at receiver, and they came away with Ronnie Bell.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's inexcusable. Give us another team that you thought underwhelmed.
I think there are a couple that you can pick from here, but I think we have to talk about one thing that we're going to talk about is Cody's draft grades, right? There's a process that he went through to give each team their grade. And one of
so go to Player Profiler. Okay, go to Player Profiler. Go to the news and articles section right up there on the menu, and there's several articles written by Cody breaking down the best and worst drafts, grading every team.
And one of the teams that we've discussed that got an F is Atlanta. And it's not.
Cody's brutal, man.
It's
see so many of these grades like A minus, A plus, A minus, B plus, A minus, B plus. Cody's like F, D, C, A, A minus.
Well, if you're going to give out grades, give out grades. This is
real. Be real about it.
Yeah. And Atlanta, come to Jesus moment. This is not a Kyle Pitts and or Bijan Robinson are bad football players take. The problem is, even if they hit where you took them, they are never, ever, 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 ever going to be worth that pick. Ever. Like, if Bijan Robinson turns into Derrick Henry, you are still debating whether or not you give him a second contract. You are still debating whether or not you're going to pay him $10 to $12 million for 3 more years. Like, even if you hit best case scenario and you have a Hall of Fame caliber running back, this is still a bad pick. There's it is borderline indefensible. And I understand it's an offensive weapon. We're getting this, we're getting that. You just can't do it. You cannot do it. If you want to do it at the end of the first round, or maybe even in the late teens, it's somewhat justifiable for a generational running back prospect. But 8 is just way too high, right? There's nothing that can be said in defense of Bijan Robinson at 8. And it's great for our fantasy side stuff, because we love high draft capital running backs because we know they're going to get the goddamn ball. But pick-wise,
No, you can't draft a running back in the top 10.
What?
This is just one of those teams that just has not figured out how to adjust the grades by position. You have to factor in positional value and how much a particular position like tight end or running back, as we've talked about, brings to your team. How much does a running back, even the best running back, affect wins and losses? And San Francisco made a mistake trading valuable picks for a running back. You never need to do that, right?
No.
Just like Bijan Robinson, as great as he is in the top 10, is insane. It's not kicker insane,
No.
right? But think of what they've done. I mean, they've made 2 Janikowski picks in the last 3 years, where you go tight end in the top 5. That's equally as insane as running back in the top 10. Just
And
don't do it.
the
Don't. The
problem, Matt,
history of these players in these draft slots is just littered with failure. So don't do it.
if you look at this, right, the way this board fell, Atlanta in those 2 drafts should have come away with Jamar Chase and then Jackson Smith-Njigba plus significant other draft capital. And instead, they have a tight end that they want to use as a blocking tight end for reasons that no one can possibly explain.
Right.
And a running back. What?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. And they have needs like in the secondary. Like they should have been investing in the defense, especially who was available. When I saw that Julius Brents was available in the mid-second round, and then they trade up. Now, I get Matthew Bergeron.
Like him a lot as a player.
Guard, a guard with quick feet, not that kind of versatility, can play a bunch of positions, can also play some right tackle. I like the pick.
I do too.
I just was like, even if they had the best secondary, I would have gone Julius Brents. Julius Brents is a freak. Julius Brents is a pterodactyl. There was a gift that he was there, and all these teams that passed on Brents in that spot, I think, from the Saints with Isaiah Foskey, woof. Right, Carolina, Jonathan Mingo, woof. Even the Green Bay, I love Luke Musgrave, but come on, man. Julius Brents is staring right at you. What are you doing? Though the pick before Brents, though, Joe Tippmann. Joe Tippmann was very highly graded by Cody. So yeah, Cody
same.
did not love Atlanta's draft, did not love the way that they emphasize the run. Essentially, if you're going to be investing your early capital in the running game, you're probably going to be a bottom 10 draft, and you're at risk of getting an F from Cody, and that's what Atlanta did. Give us another team.
I believe the lone F minus. There is an F minus, believe it or not.
Oh,
is
no.
Washington.
Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, God. Yeah. I mean, it's one Matthew Bergeron was the best available offensive lineman after Steve Avila went off the board. That's a great time to get a guard early second round. I almost never criticize that pick unless a guy like Julius Brents, possibly the best corner in this class, is on the board. To go a 160-pound corner in the middle of the first round was crazy to me.
Yeah.
That's how they kicked this off. Look at the players they could have had. Just look at who was available. It's embarrassing.
How
are they not trading down? How are you not trading down?
So many needs.
They had Christian Gonzalez in there. They had Christian Gonzalez, right? If you're not, let's say that you're not the Julius Brents fanatic that I am. Cool. It's fine, right? Well, if you like size and athleticism, then the chalk corner, the guy that had fell 10 spots and should have been vacuumed up well before that, was Christian Gonzalez. But instead, they go Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State. Washington does this where they draft a guy who is not on anyone's board at that particular draft spot, especially with Christian Gonzalez sitting there.
The problem is Washington probably didn't do enough due diligence on Gonzalez, period, thinking he wouldn't be there. They outsmart themselves all the time. They outsmart themselves, right?
That's what it was? They didn't have a good book on him because they assumed he wouldn't be there. So then they panicked.
How do you possibly look at that
That's
dude
got to be
staring you in the
it.
face and take another corner.
You
How?
can't. You
You
can't.
can't.
Nobody. I mean, nobody. I can't believe there
Go
was a
find me the
board
scout.
on planet Earth that had Forbes over Gonzalez.
There are two things that I can promise you. One, you will not find a scout that's willing to put their name on it. You may find a scout that had to take, but there's probably no one out there that was going to put their name on Emmanuel Forbes over Christian Gonzalez. And two, nobody had Devin Witherspoon going at 5 in a mock draft to Detroit. Other than that, everything else we can argue about. But those two things, nobody had. So if you are drafting a corner in the first round, do your work on all the first round corners, because there is no way your process led you organically. If you did the same amount of work on Gonzalez that you did on Emmanuel Forbes, there's no way your process led you to Emmanuel Forbes. I'm sorry, there isn't. There's no way. Because again, you're projecting, right? Christian Gonzalez is not a projection. We know what he is. A disaster. And the really sad part for Washington is the corner that they drafted in round 2, Jartavius Martin, out of Illinois, might end up being better than the one they drafted in round 1.
He's super explosive.
Like,
but they're going to move him to safety? Or they're going to move him to a nickel corner because he's 195 pounds. Still, that's still, he's a lot bigger than the other guy they drafted. So how many slot receivers is Washington teed up to handle? Like, listen, if you throw 3 slot receivers at Washington, they're going to cover them.
Yeah,
they're going to have them. They're going to have them locked down.
New England at Washington.
Jartavius Martin was a better pick. Absolutely, was a better pick. Yeah. Was that their best pick?
I think so. Cody and I agree on that. That I think is their best pick.
And then it only goes downhill from there.
Yeah, I mean, Ricky Stromberg, the center out of Arkansas, Braden Daniels, guard from Utah, KJ Henry, edge from Clemson, Chris Rodriguez, the running back from Kentucky, and Andre Jones Jr., the edge from Louisiana. They may all be fine and well. But again, if you feel the need to double tap defensive back this early with the draft capital you have, given the questions that we have about the rest of your roster, it's tough to find where's the plan here, right? Because the thing is, at least if you're Atlanta, if you look at Atlanta, even those, as much as we hated the Bijan Robinson pick, it's clear they're going to commit to the run and they're going to find out what they have in Ritter. At least there's a plan. I don't like the plan, but there is a plan. Washington has no plan. It is literally Sam Howell and vibes, and we'll figure it out on the go. That is the current Washington Commanders plan right now.
One of their biggest needs was tight end. This was one of the deepest, most talented tight end classes. How many tight ends did they draft?
0.
Right? They couldn't even have, like, they could have had Zach Kuntz, right? Just a raw hyper athlete.
Yeah.
At the end of the draft, but instead they go Chris Rodriguez, running back from Kentucky, just a slug, just a wasted pick. KJ Henry, defensive end from Clemson. You think you're discovering a diamond in the rough that no other scouts saw at Clemson in the 5th round? Nah, man.
No.
And it's also a giveaway that they just stayed pat. They didn't move around at all. This also tells you that they weren't working the phones like they should. They weren't available. They were declining out of hand without negotiation potential moves up and down the board. Right? Especially moves down. Right? If you don't want to move up, great. I generally disagree with almost every trade up that happens.
Yeah.
Right. But be available to trade down and bank that value, bank those extra picks. They just stayed level where they were. And they were not moving. They were not working the phones. They were panicking in the first round. This was a bad draft.
Here's the problem with that process. Again, a draft pick should be worth, as an organization, whatever it is, that is the maximum value you can get for it. Because somebody always, more likely than not, somebody values the pick that you're about to make more than you do. If you stick and pick 7 straight times, I guarantee you there is a team out there that values one of your picks that you made more than you do. And the problem is, once you have unwrapped the present, so to speak, it's much harder to sell. Why? Because you already took the player. Whereas when you're selling the draft pick, you're selling the dream, right? It's you can have whoever you want at 247.
That's right. You're selling the Kincaid, the unknown.
Right. You're selling them the idea that, hey, you can go take whoever the fuck you want at this point. It doesn't matter to us, right? But the idea is to find the team out there that already fell in love with someone and wants them right now.
Think about how many teams would have traded up to 16 to get Christian Gonzalez, to get
Christian
Jackson
Gonzalez.
Smith and Jigba. Think about it.
And the funniest part is, too, not only did you stick and pick with a premium pick that you probably shouldn't have had those two available at, you didn't take either of them. You didn't take the best wide receiver potentially in this draft. You didn't take either the best, second best, third best corner in this draft. You took a guy that requires serious projection to be a long-term cornerback 1 in the league. And then you followed it up in the second round by double tapping the position, potentially with a better player than you got 30 picks ago. They do this occasionally, and it blows my mind. Because again, this is the same team. Yes, granted, at the time it was Shanahan and Gruden and McVay, and that whole squad was there. Matt LaFleur was there when they took RG3 and Kirk Cousins in the same draft. But they do this sometimes. Sometimes Washington just decides, hey, we need this position, so we're going to draft them. We're going to draft 2 or 3 of them until we figure it out. And I don't get it, because if that was your plan, you should have run to the podium for Christian Gonzalez. The Emmanuel Forbes pick is one of the worst value selections that I've seen, even by their standards. That was bad. That was, it's just, there's not one
of the worst teams, and man, arguably the worst draft was the Saints. Because remember, they could have had a top pick, right? But they traded it for Chris Olave. Love Chris Olave.
I do too.
But you don't trade up knowing that you're not ready to win, right? Knowing that you don't have a quarterback, knowing that you get an injury or two on the offensive line, that you're a bottom 5 team in the league, right? And that's what happened to the Saints, right? They're like, oh, no Teron Armstead. We don't have a quarterback. We're dead. We're dead in the water. We know that they knew that last year during the 2022 draft, and yet they still traded their own 2023 pick just because, well, we got to have Chris Olave. Right? Again, great player. It'll end up working out for them, right? In hindsight, it'll look like a perfectly fine trade up, but who they could have had. They should have had 2 first-round picks this year. Would have been great. They didn't, but at least they got the first rounder, right? Through I think it was a series of events. Was it actually, it was via Denver for the Sean Payton, right? For the pleasure of overpaying a coach. The Broncos also gave up a first-round pick to the Saints. So they were gifted a first-round pick just
because they had this guy there once.
Because they had a coach that didn't want to coach for them under contract.
Yeah.
They happened to...
What an asset, by the way.
Land a pick. And what do they use it on? We talked about some of the players they could have used it on. Yeah. Players they need, right? This is a team that needed tight end. You wanted that'd have been a great time to take Michael Mayer, for example. Oh. But no. They got to stop the run, right? When you go back-to-back run defender, right? End of the first round, run defender, and then top 10 pick in the second round in Isaiah Foskey, who just looks the part of a nothing defender in the NFL, a guy that's just going to fade into the background. That's Isaiah Foskey. Anytime you're trying that hard to stop the run, your team is so far gone and has lost its way to such, it has no idea what wins games in the NFL, because the best teams, what are they doing? They're implementing a run funnel defense. They want teams to run the ball against them, because no matter how effectively and efficiently you run the ball, it can't match passing.
No.
So you want to incentivize teams to run against you. But the Saints are doing the opposite, and they're spending premium capital to incentivize teams to throw against them.
Right?
It doesn't make any sense. That's why I believe they were the worst, because they didn't even deserve that pick that they at 30 that became a run defender. Right? They traded their top 10 first rounder in what was a totally misguided trade up the previous season. And now they're acquiring players that actually make it harder to win games.
This is the funniest part about New Orleans to me is they remind me so much of their counterparts in Atlanta. Because it was just like for years, Atlanta was just like, oh, no, we're not rebuilding. We have Matt Ryan. And so now New Orleans is in the same boat. Oh, no, we're not rebuilding. We have Derek Carr. Derek Carr and what?
No. Yeah, it's just
Derek Carr and what?
It's like the duct tape franchise mode. They're in duct tape mode. These teams are in duct tape mode, and this is what trading up for Chris Olave is. It's what signing Derek Carr to a silly, overpriced extension. That's what these duct tape teams do. And there's another team I want to talk about that has not been duct taping together a 9-8 team like the Saints and the Falcons. And by the way, if I'm in, one of the great gifts of all is to be in the NFC South.
Oh my God, yeah. The winner, if the winner of the NFC South wins a playoff game, it will be a minor miracle.
I mean, 7-10 gets you in, right?
I know, and that's what they're chasing.
The AFC South, the NFC South.
They are going to hang an NFC South banner in New Orleans for what? For the right to do that for maybe 2023 and 2024 to tell the fans, oh, we won the division. This is one of the worst. This is going to be one of the worst divisions that we've ever seen. Like, man, that is a.
What about the Lions, though? What about the Lions? Because they've been building the right way. They had been focusing on the right details. And then they invest 2 premium picks in the running game. One, beyond the running game. Okay, I understand. Jahmyr Gibbs, he's going to help you in the passing game even more than the running game, right? But throws to running backs out of the backfield have the lowest expected points added by far and away. So these are not plus EV pass attempts. You don't want to incentivize your quarterback to dump it off. You want to incentivize your quarterback to throw it as deep as possible to playmakers. So actually, this is another occasion where, like the Saints, where they're shutting down the run and inadvertently coaxing their opponents into becoming more efficient and optimizing their play calling better. The Lions are doing the opposite in that they're incentivizing their quarterback to throw the ball with less depth, which is not what you want to do. You want to coax your quarterback into throwing it deeper, so they should be finding wide receivers that can get down the field. See, that's the move. That's the move. See, Jackson Smith and Jigba, the best receiver in the draft, was available numerous picks after Jahmyr Gibbs was off the board. They traded back up to get this running back. And then they go and stay pat in the middle of the first round and draft a run-stopping linebacker named Campbell. So that kind of squandering of picks is unforgivable, and it has to put you in the bottom 10 of draft. Even if they go on, and they did, they went on to have a great draft after that, because I think that Dan Campbell's influence waned in round 2 and beyond. And now that all of a sudden it's like round 2, oh, they're back, right?
Yeah.
They look like the Lions again. But just the squandering of those 2 early picks was enough to put them in the bottom 10.
Here's my question, right? And sometimes this happens and you've got to take it. We're analyzing the decision making, right? So overall, I don't think this draft class is terrible by any means. The problem is you're going to have to swap where Hendon Hooker and Brian Branch were taken with where Jahmyr Gibbs and Jack Campbell were taken for this to look like the draft that you would have ideally wanted them to have. Now, they ended up with the 5 players in Gibbs, Campbell, Laporta, Branch, Hooker in that order, right? But what we're talking about here is the process that leads you to drafting a running back at 12. Again, there is no sound process that does that. I don't care how good they are. And I like Jahmyr Gibbs a lot. It has nothing to do with how good a player he is. Nothing to do with how good Jack Campbell is going to be at linebacker for them. And I think he's going to be a really, really good one, right?
Sure.
Whatever. They're both going to be really good players, but they're really good players that you can find comps for in rounds 2 and 3. There's no
You're
need
stopping
to do
the
that.
opposing team from running against you, which is not what you want to do.
And
you are coaxing your quarterback into dumping it off more, which is not what you want to do.
At 12 and 18, this is what I'm talking about really quickly. At 12 and 18, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jack Campbell, really good players. Will not disagree with that. But what you should have seen this draft look like, right? If the Detroit Lions could have won this draft easily. And the way that they would have done it is to go Christian Gonzalez at 12. At 18, you take Jackson Smith and Jigba. Then you take Laporta and Branch and Hooker, and then you find a linebacker in round 3 or 4. If that had happened, we're not only talking about an A+, we're talking about one of the great immediate impact draft classes of all time. And they had every ability to do it.
But it's also anyone but Gibbs. It's anyone but Gibbs. They're in one of the top they have a top graded draft if they take Broderick Jones there.
Yeah.
Who was Cody's top lineman. They could have had a top lineman. Imagine Broderick Jones added to that line, that the depth, what you can do with him.
Or a true shutdown corner. Like, especially as they just let Okudah go for basically nothing.
I mean, if you could put Broderick Jones at right tackle, you could put him at guard. I mean, it would be such a dynamic and sort of suffocating offensive line. Or they could have gone Will McDonald, right? And just fortified the pass rush and help Aiden Hutchinson, right? Take pressure off Aiden Hutchinson. There's all these things that they could have done with just best player available, whoever they had. Like on our board, it would have been Broderick Jones.
Yeah. And
maybe on someone else's board, it would have been Will McDonald. And on another board, the Patriots board, maybe Christian Gonzalez. Any of those guys.
Any of them.
Their number one need happened to be cornerback, still is cornerback. It's a glaring need. So they should have gone Christian Gonzalez. Then they also have a big need, a gaping hole at number 2 wide receiver, at least until Jameson Williams comes back. And when Jameson Williams does come back, how much does he love the game? How much does he want to, does he actually want to earn that role? He didn't earn targets last year when he was on the field. So there's huge uncertainty overhang with Jameson Williams. How do you not go in Jigba there? It was there for the taking. They had it. They just, all they had to do was make the predictable move, which was to trade down out of the pick, what everyone expected, and then keep being predictable. Just take the best player at your position of need, which happened to be also just the best player overall in Christian Gonzalez, in Jackson Smith and Jigba. They had it and they blew it.
And here's the thing, right? Everybody's seen those contests. Like, well, what would you do if these were the payouts? And it's like the half court shot, $1 million, the 3-point shot, 250,000, a free throw, 100,000, a layup, 10,000. And the teams that you're watching get better every year are just taking the layups. They're not overthinking it. It's not some galaxy-brained take. We're not drafting offensive guard from small school in the middle of the first round. Nope. We'll wait till round 3 to do that, round 4 to do that. We'll take running back day 2 and day 3. We'll take tight end day 2 and day 3.
That's what Detroit did though.
And
Once they turned the draft back over to the analytics department, that's what they ended up doing. Western Kentucky defensive tackle in the late 3rd round, Broderick Martin, love the pick. Colby Sorsdahl, tackle from William and Mary in the 5th round.
Mike Tomlin off.
Perfect, right? That's exactly what you should be doing.
Yeah,
but too little, too late.
Yeah, and this is not. I don't think this is the worst draft class ever by any means. But once again, we're talking about allocation of capital, and it's about the opportunity cost given up to take a running back and a linebacker, which we know are fun pieces, but they're not building blocks. And you missed out on 2 huge building blocks and potentially the best corner in the draft in Christian Gonzalez, potentially the best wide receiver in the draft in Jackson Smith-Njigba, at positions that just matter way more. And they were 2 needs.
If you wanted to play this out in hindsight, they should have taken Broderick Jones, just because you're not going to find a premium offensive lineman.
And fortifying a strength is never a bad thing.
Exactly.
Especially
you're never going to find that
guy
outside the first 20 picks in the draft, like the Christian Darrisaw threshold, right?
Yeah.
You're never going to get that guy past the pick 22, right? The Darrisaw corollary. So for that reason, based on position scarcity, I think you go Broderick Jones, right? Then you can come right back, and in hindsight, they could have had Christian Gonzalez. They traded up 1 pick, but okay, so Christian Gonzalez goes off the board 1 pick before them. Great. They're fine with that. They know that corner is an incredibly deep, right? It's an incredibly deep class at corner. So knowing that the class is deep at corner, fine. There, you could go Jackson Smith-Njigba and then see, instead of going tight end, knowing tight end super deep, you can get a quality super athletic tight end late in the 2nd. You can get one in the 3rd. Why not go Julius Brents in the 2nd round? So that would have been my ideal draft for them. Would have been Jones and then Smith-Njigba and Brents. That would have been my dream draft for the Lions. And then again, being able to trade down and bank those additional picks. Now, Cody's grade on the Vikings draft was also poor.
Oof. Yeah. Here's the weird part about what Minnesota is in right now. They are in a situationship with Kirk Cousins with seemingly no ability to get out of it anytime soon, right? Kirk Cousins isn't going to pilot a team that is bad enough to get the kind of draft pick that they'd need to replace him adequately, right? The roster around them isn't that bad. So what do? You're in purgatory. They're not going to compete in the NFC. They may compete in the NFC North. But again, you have an Aaron Rodgers-less Packers. You have a Bears team that we like some stuff about. And you have Detroit. There's not a lot of avenue for them to get significantly better until they do something to turn over that roster. And so you look at what they did. Jordan Addison. Hard to complain if you believe that he is that guy next to Jefferson. That's not a pick that anybody can complain about. It's probably their best draft pick of all of them here, even in terms of value. Because then you go Mekhi Black, corner from USC in round, I believe it's round 3. Jay Ward, corner from LSU. The defensive tackle from LSU, Quellen Roy. Jaron Hall from BYU, the quarterback, which clearly they're chasing this theme of a Brock Purdy type. And then Dwayne McBride, the running back from UAB. You're hearing all these reports come out about how Dalvin Cook is gone. This is, again, a team that's at a crossroads. And they need to decide actively to be bad. Have to. Like, if you don't decide, Atlanta's the best example of this. If you don't decide to be bad fast enough, the league will decide it for you, and you will pay the price in multiple drafts for the capital that you could have gotten. There was a time where Matt Ryan could have been moved for a 1, maybe even 2 ones, and they squandered that opportunity. Kirk Cousins has some value to somebody. He has more value to somebody than he does to you right now. And the question is, how quickly are you going to acknowledge that with Kirk Cousins as your quarterback and your roster is presently constructed, you are not going to compete for anything other than your division? Because I promise you, you are not going into Philly and winning. You're not going into Seattle and winning. You're not going into San Francisco and winning. And San Francisco doesn't even have a quarterback that we know of yet. And I can confidently tell you the Vikings aren't going to go win a playoff game in San Francisco.
They won so many games last year.
And that's what
it's a false sense of security in their roster because they won more games than their point differential suggested they should have.
And the problem is people want to see wins and losses as the end all be all. And to some extent, we are in a wins and losses business. There's no denying that. But when those wins come the way that the Vikings did last year, how repeatable is that process? Like, how many times do you get that many wins out of that schedule?
You're asking a lot, man. You're asking a lot from a self-awareness of a team. I think you're asking too much. I think that if it were me and you, we would absolutely be tearing this thing down. And sending Cousins to the highest bidder. Absolutely. But given their situation, I still disagree with some of these picks.
Yeah.
I mean, they didn't necessarily need a receiver. They have the best receiver in the game. They didn't need a receiver in the first round. This was not a deep receiver class. And once Jackson Smith-Njigba's off the board in the first round, I'm not drafting a wide receiver. I mean, it wasn't as bad as the Chargers drafting Quentin Johnston. At least Jordan Addison is fantastic. He's a fantastic slot flanker. He's going to be great at what he does. But that's not where you should be spending first-round capital. You should be spending first-round capital like the Eagles do, like on a Nolan Smith. If you're looking to win now, and that was the move. A guy like a Nolan Smith or offensive line. And then with Mekhi Blackman, he's undersized. I saw Mekhi Blackman at the Senior Bowl. I stood next to him. He's really small. I don't know, man. I don't know. Like
slot.
He's a slot. He's a slot corner. Jaron Hall in the 5th round. Why? Jaron Hall can't play. This is an LSU safety in the 4th round, LSU defensive tackle in the 5th round. These are low upside plays. You're drafting players at teams that have been picked over by every scout. By the time you get to the 5th round, you're not going to get any value there. So the types of players they drafted in the slots they drafted them, I disagreed. I disagreed with the profiles of the players they selected in the particular rounds. And if we take a step all the way back, we also just disagree with their overall team building strategy. So those are the reasons why the Vikings are on this list of the worst drafts. Quickly, we agree that Houston and Carolina had bad drafts primarily because they overpaid to move up. And when you overpay to move up, you necessarily shed capital that could be used in a more optimal way. And then you're necessarily needing to ace all the picks that you do have left in order to have a quality draft. And they just didn't do that. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think specifically when it comes to Houston, right? Even more so than Carolina, they just need a total roster rebuild. And if that pick that they have that they traded away next year turns into the 101, imagine the haul
that the Saints all over you. This is the Saints trading up for Chris Olave in what was sure to be a top 10 pick the following year was a disaster. But trading up for Will Anderson. And it was a super deep edge rusher class where you could have got, I know Nolan Smith, they play different positions slightly, but Nolan Smith is available at the end of the first round. No reason to move up to the top of the first round to get Will Anderson, given where you could have gotten Nolan Smith. I mean, in hindsight, no one saw Nolan Smith falling to the end of the first round, but Nolan Smith in the teens, or at least where they were, right at 12, you knew Nolan Smith was going to be there. You had to, if you were doing any of your due diligence and your sort of market intelligence, you would have known that. So just stay put. Yeah. Now you're at risk of giving up.
If you gave up the 101, if you gave up the 101 in the year that it's Caleb freaking Williams, like, not
we're
all drafts
ahead.
are created
we're saying
equal,
this is inexcusable. There, as of right now, this is one of the worst drafts. But if this is Caleb Williams next year, then we have to revise the worst drafts from 2023 in all of our grades, and this becomes an F minus 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 minus.
And here's the other part of this too. Whether it's Carolina or Houston, even if you believe Bryce Young or CJ Stroud can be the guy long-term after year one, you gave away the golden ticket. You gave away your version of Trevor, of having the ability to draft Trevor Lawrence, right? Because you could have just auctioned that pick off to the highest bidder, and I promise you, it would have gotten multiple ones, multiple twos. You're talking about highway robbing somebody for the next half decade of draft.
They should have traded down. They should have traded down,
and
traded out of the second pick, traded down, not drafted a quarterback, tank as hard as possible, draft a quarterback next year.
Anyway.
They could have loaded up on offensive line and edge rush in the teens. Had they traded down, had multiple picks in the teens, it could have been such a master's class.
We have
in draft capital optimization.
And
what could have been, Anand?
What could have been? And look, now what might happen is Arizona next year, because they have Houston's pick and their own. If Arizona's as bad as we think they are, and Houston doesn't take a step with CJ at quarterback, you may be looking at the fact that not only did you not get Caleb Williams, you handed Caleb Williams and Marvin Harrison Jr. to Arizona to rebuild at the same time. It's an absolute disaster. Like there are no two ways about it. Will Anderson could be one of the best edge rushers we've ever seen. Again, it has nothing to do with the player. It's about what you gave up the opportunity to do in order to go get him. What you have given up is potentially Brock Bowers, Marvin Harrison Jr., Drake May, Caleb Williams, and the ability to mortgage that pick and get a king's ransom out of somebody who, again, wants them more than you do. It's not just about the fact that they're generational players. It's also about the fact that I guarantee you someone out there wants them more than you do, and you could have auctioned that pick off to the highest bidder and gotten yourself actual assets that will help you long-term instead of just the one really good edge rusher. That's why we hated Houston and Carolina's drafts, because it's not, you have to do so well outside of that if you do it. Every other pick that you make for the following 2 years has to be a relative hit. Otherwise, the swings that you gave up in that round 1, round 2 capital will eventually come back to bite you.
The Houston Texans will be haunted by this move for the next decade. Hey, you like that video? Be sure to subscribe and activate those alerts so you get notified as soon as new videos drop. And be sure to check out playerprofiler.com. We have all the tools for you to dominate every type of fantasy league. We have a draft kit, Dynasty Deluxe, data analysis, DFS Dominator, and don't forget the player rankings to rule them all.